Well, Chicago, University of Chicago, UC, had a very active folklore society. This was one of the things that attracted me to the school.
Okay.
And it had begun in 1960, 61, having a folk festival. The Chicago Folklore Society, University of Chicago Folklore Society, wasn't really interested in the commercial successful musicians like the Kingston Trio or even the Weavers or something like that. They wanted the real deal. Traditional, what we then call traditional today, we would call it roots, I guess, call it vernacular. I've used a lot of different terms for it, music.
Yeah.
So they started this festival, which became a renowned and successful. I partly went to school there, partly because of this going on, and became involved with the Folklore Society early on and helped to put on the folk festival and run concerts during the year. It was great. I mean, there was no distance between the musicians and the students. New Lost City Ramblers were a big contact. That
Okay.
when the festival began and the Folklore Society began, one of the founders was in contact with, I think, Mike Seeger and John Cohen, both of whom, in addition to playing with the Ramblers, were doing their own field work and collecting in the South. And the Ramblers were eager, unlike, again, the Kingston Trio or any of those commercial groups. They wanted to expose their audiences to the music that they were basically adopting and adapting. Sure. So they wanted to bring people like Elizabeth Cotten and Roscoe Holcomb and Bill Monroe and all of these people to urban university audiences. So they helped to populate the concerts and the festival at Chicago. They would appear at the festival and they would bring people with them, or they would suggest, oh, you ought to have some Cajun musicians. Here's somebody, call up Dewey Balfa and see if he can get a bunch of people together, or Reverend Reed or somebody. And yes, then as some of the folks like John Hurt and Son House started having representation, people like Dick Waterman, they'd say, get in touch with Dick Waterman, he'll fix you up. I was president of the Folklore Society in 1966-67 school year. And that was the 7th festival. It was in February. For some reason, these festivals were in January or February in Chicago.
Right.
I don't know whose dumb idea that was, but
Yeah.
I got hit. We got a 27-inch snowstorm in Chicago that weekend. It started the night before the festival and just kept snowing and snowing. So the big decision was, do we go ahead? Do we shut it down? Everything in Chicago was shut down. So we decided to go ahead. There were already people on the road. The first night was Friday night. Almost nobody had arrived. Mike Seeger had arrived. John Cohen had arrived. Tracy Schwartz, the third New Lost City Rambler, had not arrived. So Mike's then girlfriend or wife, I can't remember which at the time, Alice Gerard, became the third New Lost City Rambler. She's now a very highly respected and well-known bluegrass and old-time musician. And the other people for the concert hadn't arrived. So we called up Buddy Guy and we said, can you get a band together? He may have been booked for the night, I'm not sure, but he called us and he said, we can get there because we can walk, but we can't bring our instruments and everything. Can you get stuff for us? So we started making calls. I had a friend, Paul Asbell, and he had a blues band at the time. He was a student a couple of years behind me. Called Paul and said, we need some stuff. So he and his friends, they schlepped amps and instruments and drums over for Buddy Guy, who assembled a band. And so that was the first concert. On Saturday, there was an afternoon concert, which was usually a smaller concert. But people were still arriving. Some couldn't get there. Some were substitutions. There was a fellow who lived in Detroit that some of us knew, named Joe Feynman. He's a really fine bluegrass singer and player. And he had found, he knew this woman named Sippy Wallace.
My mama's got 'em, my papa's got 'em, my sister's got 'em.
So I had never heard of at the time. He said, "Oh, she was a blues queen in the 1920s along with Bessie Smith, and well, she'll come. Want me to bring her?" So I said, "Sure, bring Sippy Wallace." Well, Sippy Wallace was one of the great influences on Bonnie Raitt. Played piano, sang, powerful, powerful. She came. Uh, the big thing for me, I mean, all of it was incredible, but for me as a bluegrass lover and player was Flatt and Scruggs. Every year we had a different major bluegrass band. We had the Stanley Brothers and Bill Monroe and the Lilly Brothers. And Jesse, this was to be Flatt and Scruggs this year. And that morning, I got a call from Louise Scruggs, Earl's wife and manager. And she said, "We hear it's snowing in Chicago and the boys can't get there, can't drive the bus. But if you'll pay us an extra," I don't know what she said, $200, $250. Earl, who was a pilot, he can fly. Meigs Field is open. It was a military field in Chicago. It was the only thing that was open. She said, "Earl can fly the band into Chicago. Meigs Field, you get some people to pick them up." I said, "Done."
In the middle of the storm?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it had stopped. No, it had stopped snowing by then.
Okay.
The snowing had stopped by Saturday. Yes, but there was nothing. That 27 inches in the city. It's a lot.
Earl Scruggs coming on up today. We didn't have too much room in the plane, so we had to bring just what we could bring along. And he's borrowed a guitar here. It's a real nice deal.
They flew into Meigs Field.
It's very nice.
Some students, some of various sorts, hippie type students. Somehow they found a guy on the street with a Cadillac, and they commandeered this Cadillac and went to Meigs Field and picked up Flatt and Scruggs in the band and drove them. So we start this concert. I didn't know who was going to be in it, really. I had been at the bus station in Chicago on Friday waiting for people who never showed up, and saw that Sleepy John Estes, Yank Richell, and Hammy Nixon, three Tennessee blues players from the 1920s and 30s, were in town. Because they were in town, I assumed correctly, to record for Delmark Records. So I called up Bob Kessler at Delmark and I said, "We need some musicians for today. Sleepy John and the rest, they available?" He said, "Sure, I'll send them right on down." So they came down. Sleepy John was the one who did Diving Duck Blues, and he had that the crying voice. He just sounded like he was in such agony. Oh.
Awful.
Hammy Nixon and Yank Richell was the mandolin blues mandolin player. So they showed up, and then a bunch of Cajuns who were coming from the Mamou, Louisiana area. They showed up. They had driven through the storm, drinking moonshine, white mule, they called it, the whole time. They showed up. I said, "Well, you probably want to rest for a bit." "Nope, we want to get on the stage." Went out on the stage and tore up the house. And meanwhile, Flatt and Scruggs had shown up. The hippies had brought them in to Mandel Hall to the concert. And they were down in the dressing rooms getting ready. They were going to end the concert. So I went down and said hello to everybody and allowed this and that. And they are standing in one of the rooms looking completely forlorn, wearing his hat and his string tie, what we called a Scruggs tie, and his jacket and his boots. It was Lester Flatt, but no trousers, standing there in his under. So, "What's the matter, Lester?" He said, "Mark, it's Louise Scruggs, who managed the band as well as booking them and probably wiping all of their noses. Louise packed 2 pair of Earl's trousers and none of mine. What should I do?" I said, "Lester, you're going to have to wear Earl's trousers." Lester was a bit stouter than Earl. I think it was the best I ever heard Lester Flatt sing that night.
Hitting those high notes.
That afternoon, hitting those high notes.